All right, what's up, everyone? We're live. So good to see you all here in the live chat. And yeah, it's going to be an interesting stream today because Pat and I are going to discuss something that's obviously going to be a very contentious subject because it seems to be the prevailing attitude in the movement that, there's only one side to this whole conflict going on, and, you're two-siding this, and this is somehow some kind of bad thing if you're doing that, and that animal rights must be anti-Israel, and that is in an inherently anti-oppression position, and that it harms animals in some way to not speak out about what's happening in Palestine. Pat and I are going to discuss today how there could be an argument that the opposite is true. We're going to go through some talking points today. And for anyone who's wondering, George, aren't you a little bit crazy for doing this? You're going to get cancelled and stuff for doing this in the face of what's going on. Well, yeah, I mean, I probably... Right, exactly. I mean, yeah, okay, exactly. It'll be the fifth or sixth time I've been cancelled. It's water off a duck's back to me now. And ultimately, what we find every time a current thing happens is that these people are wrong. They look back at some kind of cancellation campaign that they enacted, and they look back and they see that, in fact, the people saying, guys, we shouldn't be making the movement all about this and blah, 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 that those people are actually right. They never offer an apology for doing so. But I think one of the key things I want to draw to light here is human fallibility. We can all be wrong about things. That includes me and Patricia during the stream. We might be wrong about stuff. But ultimately, there are some very toxic people in our movement trying to make this conflict about one side, and they believe they have the objectively right answers on every little thing. And the truth is, just like they've been wrong on the other stuff before, they could be wrong about this. And we're going to discuss some ways that this could be harming the animal rights movement ultimately. Patricia, would you like to sort of just give us a rundown of the kind of stuff you've seen when we talk about anti-Israel sentiment? And I don't just want to talk about, general things, just like saying, oh my God, it's horrific what's happening in Gaza, all these bombings and stuff like that, because war sucks, right? Or thinking that the IDF's tactics are questionable, or talking about war crimes, anything like that. When I talk about anti-Israel sentiment, I'm talking about toxic hatred for the country itself, for activists who are from there. What kind of things, what kind of behavior have you seen with regards to that?
Yeah. So just to rewind a bit, sucking at a war you started is not genocide. So that's just my general position, because you were sort of alluding at that before, like the horrificness in Gaza and the reality of war. That, on my view, is what's happening. And you also said at the beginning, we're here to explore, that there could be another side to this whole conflict, and people are acting like there's only one right side. I am one of those people, but I am on the pro-Israel side. So this isn't just a let's explore, who could be right here or who could be wrong, or there's nuance to this. This is a very clear issue to me. And I think for an issue that's so morally clear, it's never been portrayed as something so morally confusing. Like, to me, this is veganism or carnism. This is, a terrorist organization or a democratic state. And that's really what we're dealing with here. So just to clarify my own personal approach to this conflict. In terms of anti-Israel hate, oh my God, where is the line between anti-Semitism and anti-Israel? Because they sort of just blend into one. I've seen memes shared just mocking Jewish people in general. I don't know if you support Israel, you can't be a vegan, which literally makes no sense whatsoever.
Right.
Those type of sentiments. Just a little bit of everything. And I guess as the war keeps going on and Israel keep winning, because they've generally won every military war they've ever been in, the hatred for Jews worsens. And then there's shit, there's the stuff that's on campus, the tents, encampments, which are portrayed as pro-Palestinian, liberation camps. But to me, there's not much of a distinction between Hamas and Palestine. Being pro-Hamas and pro-Palestine, seeing as something like 80% of the population there support the Hamas government. So I don't even know what it means to be, that distinction. So that's just some of the things I've kind of seen, but it's everywhere. Like there's never been a war that's been more talked about apart from the Second World War. But yeah, to me, this is Nazi versus the Allies. Like there is no like room for nuance here, generally speaking.
Right. And just to talk through some of the stuff that I've witnessed recently that just shows toxic anti-Israel sentiment. In my comments section yesterday on my community post, someone mentioned that they shared, the vegan flag recently on their page, the blue, green and white flag. And someone condemned them for sharing that because the flag was allegedly designed by an Israeli.
It probably was, because animal rights is huge in Israel, which is another reason why as vegans we should be supporting them.
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, we can get onto that in a bit, but I mean, that's just, see, at that point, we're not even just talking about like, people are separate from their governments or anything like that. That's just pure xenophobia. Like at this point, it's literally like saying, you shouldn't share that flag because it was designed by, I don't know, an Arab or something like that, just like an Arab who happens to be vegan, and just purely xenophobic hate, racist hate for who the identity of the person designing something. I've seen disgusting contempt towards the hostages taken on October the 7th, including people seemingly celebrating them being dragged through the streets naked and stuff and being paraded around and spat on through Gaza. These are from the so-called consistent anti-oppression vegans who say we need to make animal rights about human rights as well. Well, so much for your human rights there, dragging naked women through the streets of Gaza and spitting on them.
No, there's rape victims. Like there's literally footage of rape victims with blood on women's pelvis and that area, their tendons have been slashed. It's very obvious they have been sexually abused. And then you get people, from the UN and these people online claiming otherwise when we literally have footage of what happened. But yeah, we're expected to believe every other story in Me Too, just not when it's Jewish women and not when we actually have evidence for once.
Yeah, right. So this was one of the observations I pointed out in my video about anti-Semitism in the movement recently, all coming from intersectionals, by the way. So yeah, there's that total inconsistency of hashtag believe women, except obviously when it's Jews. We've seen this demand of evidence. Now, obviously, both you and I have always said in the movement that we need evidence for sexual allegation cases and stuff like that. But what's rich is coming from these people is they cancel people from animal rights organizations for even suggesting that we should question if there's evidence for this claim before we ban this person or whatever it is. But then as soon as the rapes on October the 7th happen, they demand evidence for this. Where's your evidence that this happened? Now, I'm not saying that in any case we shouldn't suggest that there should be evidence for anything. And that includes on October the 7th, right? But when it's coming from these people, you can really see just the hatred seeping through for people of a certain country. One thing I wanted to just start the stream off on, because I want to ask you why you think this is happening. And Sam Harris mentioned this in his podcast, one of his various podcasts about the issue, which are very worth listening to, by the way. I'd recommend people listen to the Sam Harris podcasts. Why is there this oppressor versus oppressed dichotomy coming from kind of the far left vegans in every single case there is? There's never nuance to anything. There's never this side could be the good guy and this side could be the bad guy. We need to weigh up the facts. Why is every little thing that there is just boom, this is oppressor, this is oppressed, very black and white thinking, no kind of examining anything? Why is that happening? And why are people doing this for seemingly every issue that there is?
Yeah, I think it's very simple. I think it's anti-white hatred. Like that's honestly at the core of a lot of these sentiments. There's obviously the other aspect, which is Jews versus Muslims, which goes back religiously and historically. But if we're talking about a wider problem of this oppressor-oppressed dichotomy, it started in the universities and it basically teaches rich white people are bad and poor brown people are good. And that kind of originated from the American universities, and it's literally been mapped onto every other conflict ever, even when it has nothing to do with it. So, and it stems from kind of this Marxist Foucault vision of the world, where every single action you do is some kind of demonstration of power, and usually it's white people doing it. And so this kind of colonizer and colonized dichotomy has been mapped onto the whole world and to every single conflict ever. So that's why we don't care if it's North Korea doing the abusing, which they do on a daily basis because they're a totalitarian dictatorship. We don't care if it's Iran or any place else. Or we say we care, but there's no media coverage of it. No one really shows the same level of interest or the level of rage, as opposed to when it's Israel doing it. And even they're not actually really doing it because they're engaging in a legitimate war in which they were attacked. So yeah, I do think it stems from anti-white racism, which is intensifying. And I think more people need to speak out about.
This is interesting because why are they assigning whiteness to Israel? Because I think 60% of Israelis are not white. So I think it's a very ethnically diverse country. It's technically a minority white country. It's just that whites are a sizable minority there. Why are they, if it's the case that what you're saying is true, why are they ascribing Israel as white?
So it's not just Israel, it's the Jews as well. So there are different demographics in the Jewish population, and it really shows their ignorance as well. But I think they have this idea of like, because the Jews kind of are like in some ways the epitome of Western achievement and great. Like if you look at Nobel Prizes and people that did really great things, a large majority of them are Jewish, and Jewish people are a minority. So it's a lot of people, it's a lot of Jewish people that have achieved these kind of great Western things. So I think they associate that demographic of Jews with whiteness, because when most people think of Jews, they're not thinking of Muslim Jews or Arab Jews or non-white Jews. Most people tend to think, oh, Jewish, white, Hitler prosecuted them, then they became very successful and people hate them again. So I think that's kind of the simplified narrative in their head. And I have to admit, if someone told me to imagine a Jew in my head, a white person does come to mind. And then you have white people hating on Jews as well, non-Jewish white people who also don't like Jews. And that's very prevalent in the kind of pro-America first kind of movement. I don't know if you've seen much of that, like Nick Fuentes, kind of like Alex Jones, a bit like Tucker Carlson. There's like a spectrum, but it gets intensely crazier. Where they're this is kind of like the horseshoe theory that we were going to talk about, where people go so right, they go left. But yeah, this whole anti-Semitism thing has a strong anti-white hatred to it, I think. But ironically, there's also within that a group of white people who also don't like the Jews.
Yeah, it's interesting because anti-Semitism is so prevalent that they get hatred from the far left and the far right. But in the animal rights movement, there are far left vegans, there are far right vegans. But mainly the anti-Semitism that I'm seeing is coming from the far left vegans. Is that the case with what you've seen?
In the vegan movement, because most vegans are left, most of the hatred for Jews is going to come from left vegans until the movement gets bigger, and then we get more of these America First types. But outside of the vegan movement, I think it's also true that I'm seeing it more from leftists than right-wingers. There's like very like populist kind of voices, like a few people that are public figures that are popular and anti-Jewish, but I don't see it as like on average. Whereas with the left-wing people, I think, they're still seeing it through this colonized mentality. And then you like refute them with facts, or you say, no, this is not true because of this, and they still won't accept it. So they're just holding on to an idea, an ideology of hating white people or hating Jewish people because they have this dichotomy in their head.
And I mean, one sort of proof of the either speaking out for, in defense of anti-Semitism, or indeed just the silence and the acceptance of anti-Semitism I'm seeing from the far left, is there's still been no condemnation of BLM for their anti-Semitism. When they bailed out Quintez Brown for the anti-Semitic hate attack that he tried to commit. the anti-Semitic hate groups that BLM is in bed with, black supremacist groups like the Black Hebrew Israelites and the Lion of Judah Armed Forces, whose members have done these, shooting attacks on, kosher grocery stores and stuff like that. There's just this wall of silence from the so-called woke vegans, the so-called pro anti-discrimination, the so-called pro-human rights vegans. There's this wall of silence from them over anything to do with anti-Semitism, especially if it comes from black supremacist groups. Have you noticed that?
I haven't. I'm not really across the black supremacist demographic or what. I know there's a type of awkwardness, I think, because if they defend Jews or if they side with Jews or Israel, they're kind of letting their ideology down, because in their head they're siding with rich white people, and in their head they're also not siding with Muslims. So I think that's another big factor for them as to why they're silent on anti-Semitism. And I think they just don't take it seriously, because historically speaking, the Jews are very successful. Even after they were persecuted by Hitler and after the Second World War, they still have somehow come out on top, so to speak. So I think vegans who happen to be far left are very reluctant to support a group that has this so-called whiteness, which is basically success, I guess, which is racist in itself.
Do you think if it was the case that Arabs were the ones being rounded up, massacred by 6 million during the Holocaust by the Nazis, and it was, let's say the reverse happened of what's happened. Let's switch the places, right, between the Jews and the Arabs historically. Do you get the impression that actually the kind of hateful intersectionals in the movement, do you think they would actually have the reverse position on this, and they would actually agree with the British mandate to give the Arabs the land, a piece of land to live there, and say, this is a land for your own to be safe from persecution because you've been driven out of every country that you've been in? Do you get the impression that they would actually side with the Palestinians if this was the case? Like, say you switched the two, because I do get that impression.
Yeah, it's hard to say because it's like an alternative reality you're proposing.
Right.
But I think, yes, because the impression I get is that they're siding with a demographic and an ideology rather than the reality of what's happening, or who attacked who first, or who's retaliating, or who was more reasonable historically, which I think Israel absolutely was. When there have been other attempts at peace, generally Palestine has rejected it. So if I somehow had a gun to my head and said choose, I would say they would treat it a lot differently. George, I'm just going to quickly grab a jumper. So I'm getting ready
go for it. That's fine. Yeah.
I just had a thought about what you said, because Muslims are historically not victims, like they were historically colonizers. So
they're victims of themselves mainly, right?
Yeah.
Most Muslims are victims of oppression from their own governments and stuff, I guess, for blasphemy, all this kind of stuff. So I can see what you're saying.
Yeah, because they don't seem to see a reality, because if they do, they would realize that Muslims are not historically victims, but they want to see them a certain way because of the color of their skin or because of the color of somebody else's skin and who's interacting with them. So I think.
Well, I'll tell you something interesting I have observed though, because some vegans are saying that they only care, intersectionals only care depending on who the victim is. I think it's actually based on who the victimizer is. And I'll tell you why that is. If you look today at Muslim oppression, Muslims are being oppressed by other groups as well. So, for example, there's the Rohingya genocide taking place. I think that's in Myanmar. There's obviously the Uyghur Muslims who are being put into
China.
concentration camps in China. Why aren't they speaking out about that? And why aren't they speaking about that Yemen is currently being absolutely flattened by Saudi Arabia? If you look at the photos, it looks just like Gaza. Like if you just type in Yemen bombing, you will see the picture. You wouldn't know that this is Gaza, this is Yemen. They just look the same. They're both just been absolutely obliterated. Yeah. Why aren't intersectionals making the movement about this, talking about this, saying we must stand against Saudi Arabia, we must stand against China, we must stand against Myanmar? Because they associate those groups with brown skin, and they don't care when brown people do the oppressing, and they, for some reason, associate Israel with white skin, and that is what's happening here.
Yeah, and I think that's a good expansion on our original theory that I put forward about anti-white racism and anti-white hatred. It's a cover for that. A lot of this stuff is a cover for it, because that's, if you link it back to one thing, it's about the person having white skin. And there's no condemnation, and there's also no responsibility expected from any of the surrounding, countries in that surrounds Israel and Gaza to have any kind of humanitarian responsibility towards the Palestinian people or in any other conflict, that they are expected to act more moral or different or better. It's like we don't have those expectations of non-white people, and we're not going to condemn them either. It's very patronizing as well, and stripping them of agency. I don't even know if it's patronizing, because they're not even considering the conflict is not in their head because the oppressor isn't white.
Yeah, and even when we don't take Muslims being oppressed into account here, there's so many injustices going on in the world right now. And, I haven't seen any like NARD disruptions over the fact that NARD was held in Uganda this year. Uganda being an apartheid state, by the way, which treats gay people differently from straight people. But I haven't seen a single intersectional get on the megaphone at an animal rights event and say, vegans, why are you being silent about the fact that NARD is being held in Uganda this year, which it was. It's just about Israel. Everything, their sole focus right now, their hyper focus is just on Israel. And when you just hyper-focus on the world's only Jewish state and completely ignore everything else that's going on, of course, it's absolutely understandable that you're going to get accused of anti-Semitism. And they'll deny it. But I genuinely can't think what else it could actually be.
Yeah. No, it's a process of elimination, and there is no other explanation. If you look at organizations like the United Nations, they're staffed with anti-Semitic people. They're often, fundamental Islamists or sympathetic to that. And I think I saw a study recently, and it was like Israel had more crimes allocated to them by the UN than the entire world combined. So that includes like North Korea, Iran, and just these horrific places where you wouldn't last a day there. Yeah. And to say that Israel has committed more crimes than them put together, like the whole world put together, all these other countries. I don't know what that is besides anti-Semitism.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to get onto one of the other fascinating things that I heard on one of Sam Harris's podcasts recently, which could be, I talked at the beginning of the stream about fallibility and how anyone could be wrong about this. Now, it's very easy for people to look at what's happening in Gaza and point the finger at Israel as the bad guy. Now, one reason that people could be wrong about that, despite the horrific images and that people are seeing on the news, is the way that we get our news, the way that we're influenced about ideas now in the West. One of the things that Sam Harris revealed is that there could be some kind of psyop going on. And he mentioned, I don't know if you remember him talking about this, Pat. Do you remember him talking about Qatari influence in like US universities and stuff?
Oh yeah, he did that recently. Yeah, so he's got, just for your audience, he's got many good episodes on this, but the two really good ones is called The Sin of Moral Equivalence and The Infernal Logic of Jihad. He's done so many, but if you watch those two, and then he did one in 2014, actually, Why Don't I Criticize Israel Before Any of this shit even happened? and that lays out like the foundations of his arguments, and then he expands on them in these recent ones. But it's really like the holy trilogy. Like they're really good content on Israel. But yeah, go on. I did hear him talk about Muslim influences on the universities.
Well, I'm no expert on this, so I don't know if you can provide any more insight. But basically, he said that maybe a significant number of US universities, where a lot of these kind of ideas are coming from, you know, the lecturers are espousing these, the students en masse are doing these protests in their tents out the front. He says a lot of these US universities are being funded by like Qatari billionaires, and perhaps certain bits of education are being looked at through a sort of pro-Islamist, anti-Western lens, and being inflicted on the West. So what stuff we might even be hearing from Western media, stuff we might be hearing from Western intellectual spaces like university research departments and stuff, could actually be anti-Semitic, pro-Islamist rhetoric, just dressed up as facts, as truth, as education, in order to kind of get us in the West on the side against Israel.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of foreign influence going on in universities, not just from Islamic groups, but also like China as well. Right. And a lot of that is public information. You can see who donates money to schools. You can see all the Jewish donors as well. That's a very big. So the Jews have a lot of sway, and they have a lot of power in the world. I'm not saying they run the world, but that's not that's a true thing to say. So they also donate a lot of money to these schools. So it's kind of like a tug of war between these Islamic billionaires and Jewish billionaires. And I think the Jews probably have more money and more sway. But yeah, that is a real concern. And I'm sure it is happening, because if you're going to give a school, I don't know, $20 million, you want them to represent your ideas. That's just if you think otherwise, you're an idiot. Like if I'm going to give a large amount of money to an institution, I'd want them to represent the morals that I have. Otherwise, what the fuck am I even doing it for?
Yeah, and that's very worrying, to think that young people's minds could be very possibly being, well, we already know that this is happening. It has happened for the last few years, that US universities are now just nothing more than political indoctrination camps. Like the US's education system is on its knees at the moment because of the stuff that we've been witnessing coming out of here. But when we're hearing it has this level of sinister influence, that it's basically turning the West against itself. And obviously the Israel being an ally of the West, and so there's that connection there. That's quite scary, isn't it?
Yeah, I can speak totally from experience. I spent the last 7 years in academia. I work in academia. I'm doing my PhD at the moment, and it's worse than you think, probably. Has been my experience talking to people. I'm not going to name my school or who, where I'm doing what. It's prevalent in all schools, and in Australia, it's not as bad as America, is my general impression. Yeah. But it's getting there if nothing stops it. We're getting some pushback. Like I said, Jewish donors are pulling their money, and I don't think they can just rely on Islamic donors. They're not getting that much money, where I think it's at that stage yet. And the thing is as well, I'm not sure how much of it is just kind of like for show, like they're just indulging these radicals because they don't want to have to deal, with the bad press or deal with being called racist. Because I know from I won't say which sources or who I spoke to, but I know a lot of people at the top of these universities just think it's stupid, and they're just kind of like, right, let's just like give them, lip service, these people dressed up in, I don't know, hijab and pretending to be progressives, and it's going to go away in about 6 months, and we're getting all this money from Israel anyway, because the Jews give a lot of money to different Australian schools and American schools. Yeah. Kind of like, I don't know how much of it is just like bark as well and not bite.
I mean, assuming this is all true, then let's sort of just tie this into how this could ultimately be harming animal rights. The reason this could harm animal rights is because when you pit the West against itself, with the West being a leader currently in the world in progressing animal rights, it's by no means perfect. Every Western country participates in the animal holocaust, and there's vegans in every city, in all the different countries around the world. But let's face it, the West is the region of the world that is mostly on board with veganism, with an animal rights movement.
Yeah.
when there's going to be Qatari, Islamist kind of influence taking place in our schools and stuff, that's not going to be a good thing for animals in the long run, because you'll end up getting now people in the future in the West who are going to be conditioned into speciesist views in the name of religion. So even when we talk about this Israel-Palestine conflict, from that kind of perspective, I can only see this being as a negative thing for animals, assuming this is all true, what Sam Harris mentioned on his podcast. And there is this psyop going on against the West that's basically going to turn the West against itself and lose the values that it has, including for animals.
Yeah, it's already happening. So back to what you were saying about we need the West because we're animal rights activists and we want to see animal rights progress. I don't think it's just I think it's bigger than just we're only seeing animal rights progress here. I think the animal rights doctrine itself is a Western, mostly Western, mostly white doctrine. Like it stemmed from this idea of speciesism and veganism, and it didn't really get pushed to the forefront until Peter Singer published his book Animal Liberation in 1975. And then Tom Regan published The Case for Animal Rights. And those were the two kind of things that made animal rights go to the public's forefront. It's a Western doctrine. Like I've had these debates with different people in academia as well who try and say, oh no, Buddhism had this. Hinduism also had this. I'm like, no, but the West is the only place that said an individual rights framework for animals that's based on their own sentience and their own worth. No other religion and everything did that. Like when you look at Buddhism, it's about peace with yourself and about the suffering of other creatures. It doesn't talk about anything about rights. It was the first thing that put animal rights in like a deontological framework. So I think it is it's a Western doctrine.
Well, here's the thing. Yeah, I agree with you that veganism isn't about spiritual stuff. It absolutely is about secular rights-based ideology. I half agree and half disagree with you here. What I do agree with you is that the West formalized it and made it this kind of secular rights-based philosophy from that regard, a legal system that or trying to make it into a legal system, should I say, because obviously animal oppression is still legal, unfortunately. But we have had vegans throughout history who were vegans solely for the rights reasons, such as al-Ma'ari in the ancient Arab world in Syria, who wrote, as far as we know, the world's oldest vegan text, which is I no longer steal from nature. I guess what happened is it has been an idea throughout the whole world. But yeah, when we talk about the stuff like, you get these Western leftists who mention, oh, the Hindus actually created it and stuff. It's like, no, that was just the whole spiritual kind of stuff and is more of a self-serving thing. But I agree with you that, yeah, the West advanced its formalization. The vegan society was founded in the West.
Yeah, it made it matter. Like, yeah, some Arab guy wrote a text ages ago, and I haven't read that text, and I don't know if it will even fulfill what I think is important. Like, is he saying this is the sentience of animals? They're an individual. I respect the individual. Or is he saying something like, I respect nature, and animals are a part of nature, and therefore I respect animals? No, that's a big distinction.
It's the most based vegan poem of all time. It's like talking about not exploiting and stealing from animals.
And doesn't say rights. Like that's a really important thing in the individual rights of the animal individual.
Well, it's a poem, so he can't say every little thing. But shall I read it out now?
Yeah, okay.
Why I no longer steal from nature.
Like, I'm just saying it can't just be, I don't want to harm animals, or animals should be left alone, or animals deserve respect. I want to see the individual rights of animals, because that's what this whole thing is talking about, the animal rights movement.
Sure. But, okay, well, you can see that this guy is based, though, right? So listen, so this is the point. So this is al-Ma'ari, I no longer steal from nature. He says, you are diseased in understanding and religion. Come to me that you may hear something of sound truth. Do not unjustly eat fish the water has given up, and do not desire as food the flesh of slaughtered animals, or the white milk of mothers who intended its pure draught for their young, not noble ladies. And do not grieve the unsuspecting birds by taking eggs, for injustice is the worst of crimes. And spare the honey which the bees get industriously from the flowers of fragrant plants, for they did not store it that it might belong to others, nor did they gather it for bounty and gifts. I washed my hands of all this and wished that I perceived my way before my hair went grey. So there we are. What do you think of that poem?
I think it's got a good message, but I wouldn't say that an animal rights doctor.
Pat, you're a tough cookie.
This guy is he the one that's also into anti-nationalism?
Yes, he was. Yeah. Yes, he was blind. He was an atheist, an anti-natalist, and a vegan.
Yeah. Look, for me, it's not really like a doctrine. I would say this started like animal rights or something, but I think it's on the right track.
Sure.
But yeah, generally speaking, I totally agree with you that if Islam or another non-Western ideology takes over, animal rights is not going anywhere. We are only seeing it progress in the West. And I think that is because it stems from Western principles like liberty, freedom, and ideas associated with that.
Now, one thing that I want to draw a particular light to that I've seen a lot of recently in the movement is this comparison of anyone who even defends Israel, or even anyone who even two sides this, what's going on. You know, this, oh, guys, there are two sides to this conflict. Let's not make the movement about this, blah, blah, blah. Them being accused of Nazism. You know, you're a Nazi, you're a Zio-Nazi. You know, this is not, there are Nazi vegans in these spaces who support Israel, blah, blah, blah. What do you think is the massive, glaringly hilarious hypocrisy there that is just so stupid that people don't realize this, that it's an absolute wonder that this isn't being called out more? What do you think the absolute glaring
well, the people that they're calling Nazis are trying to defend Jews, so probably not a great comparison or not a great insult.
Yeah, and Nazis are overwhelmingly anti-Israel. So I don't want to do an association by guilt fallacy here. So I'm not saying that anyone who is anti-Israel is a Nazi or something. That's not what I'm saying. However, if you're going to make the claim that someone is a Nazi because they support Israel in this conflict, or because they see two sides in this conflict, or whatever it is, that's just going to sound utterly ridiculous, because it's actually Nazis who oppose Israel. Israel is a Nazi nightmare. It's a Jewish pro-LGBT friendly, pro-democracy superstate. It's like Hitler. Hitler is rolling in his grave right now, crying about Israel. It would be, again, I don't want to make an association by guilt fallacy, but the Nazis want a hashtag free Palestine here. So again, I'm not lumping people in who want hashtag free Palestine with Nazis. But if people are just going to throw those labels around, if they are going to throw it to one side of this war that's going on, the only side they could logically actually throw it at, if they want any semblance of credibility, is at the anti-Israel side, because Nazis are anti-Israel.
Yeah, I really think there's some very strange allies forming within this conflict. You follow the comic Stone Toss. He's like a right-wing, kind of anti-Semitic, but sometimes like he puts okay content out, and he did one where there was a tug of war, and the Israeli guys got allies like India, because you know how India is very pro-Israel, but they also have this, like, apparently weird, some sections have some weird affection for Hitler or something like that. And then on the other side, you have pro-Palestine, and then next to the Palestine guys, like a queers for Palestine. And neither of them are very happy about the allies they've like managed to recruit in this particular conflict.
Oh my God. Yeah, that it is very strange, some of the stuff we're seeing. And I also just want to make it clear as well, when we talk about the Nazism stuff, just to kind of show the allyship here and where it really lies. One of the main things as well, one of the main historical events that the sort of intersectional woke mob within veganism who are throwing these Nazi labels around, one of the things that they're hiding is that, was it I think it was 74 terror attack on the Israeli athletes at the Munich Olympics. That was coordinated by Palestinian militants and neo-Nazis. They collabed together to do the attack on the Israeli athletes.
Yeah.
Now, this is just going back to the fallibility thing I mentioned as well. There are two groups in societies that you should never trust, right? You could call this George's razor. Nazis and SJWs, right? Basically, anything they say, you should probably just discard. When both of those groups are unanimously just purely driven by hatred towards Israel, that's very suspicious, right? And that should make anyone who's unsure or who is just wanting to jump on the bandwagon about this conflict that we're seeing in the animal rights movement now for fear of not appeasing the mob, that should make them suspicious. Now, again, I don't have all of the historical facts and stuff about what's going on. I could be wrong about stuff. Anyone could be wrong about all this. But when both Nazis and SJWs are in agreement with something...
Yeah, you got a problem.
You've got a problem, right. That's very suspicious.
Yeah, it's good you brought up that coordinated attack on the athletes. I know in the Second World War, Hitler actually recruited Islamists as part of some of his armies. There's a good book written on it. And there's a lot of parallels between, and I'm not aiming this at all Muslims, obviously there's some moderate Muslims, I don't know how many, but I'm sure there is. But there is a lot of similarities in radical Islamism, their ideology, and Nazism, like the extreme gender roles.
They're both fascism. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, they're authoritarian. So yeah, there is that as well.
Well, Hitler, even though he was a Christian, he kind of hated what he called something like the feebleness and the limp-wristedness of Christianity. Turn the other cheek and stuff. Yeah. He didn't like people who weren't white, and he had to be but at the same time, the ideology of Islam, which he associated with Arabs and stuff, he did admire. He actually made some pro-Islam quotes. If you look at Hitler, he said something like how he admired Islam for its, its ferocity in the face of, and its authoritarian nature, and how it has these strict kind of roles and stuff. So there is obviously the links between Islamofascism and fascism. They absolutely, like we said, we don't want to lump, moderate Muslims and more liberal-minded Muslims into that. But of course, there is that intersection that you could call it there. These authoritarian Islamist countries, they are fascist countries. They just are. And the Antifa crowd, it's funny that they focus more on Israel than they do on these Islamist countries who are enacting the stuff that were Hitler's dream: gender roles, persecution of gays, persecution of blasphemers, of Jews. Yeah, no, I just wanted to say as well, this is Sam Harris's point as well, that he says that Hamas and religious extremists are actually worse than Nazis because they believe in paradise. So the Nazis were extremely racist and it's a horrible, evil ideology, but it's not the same thing as being completely insane and out of touch with reality. So the idea of martyrdom and dying for going to Allah, dying for your cause, sending your kids to die for your cause is very prevalent in a lot of radical Muslims, families and groups in Muslim majority countries. So if the Nazis believed in paradise, they would be like Hamas or something like that. There's this added element of crazy that the Nazis don't, technically have. Yeah, including one of the things that we're seeing very sickening footage of Hamas doing, which, again, this just isn't being touched in our movement by the cancellation mob, is the brainwashing of children from like 3 or 4 years old to be pro-Hamas, to hate Jews, posing with guns and stuff with them, dancing in military, marching down the streets with assault rifles in their hands and stuff, in videos and stuff with them.
And this is the thing that's the most difficult to convey to a Western audience, or because they're either not listening to you, or they're delusional, or they don't want to believe someone could have this approach to life and approach for their kids. So recently I was talking to my friend and he said, oh, they must really hate their own children. Like they don't just hate other people's children, they hate their own children to send them to die. And I'm like, no, they don't hate their own children. They genuinely believe their kid is going to go to paradise if they let the IDF shoot them. Like that's actually what they believe. So if you like, I know we can't imagine it because it's too insane, but if you genuinely believe your daughter or son was going to go to paradise after being killed, you wouldn't care if they were killed or not. So it's not hatred, and that's a really important thing to convey about the reality of Islamic jihad.
Well, I saw a disturbing video recently of a Palestinian man holding up his son in front of IDF, sort of border forces, holding his son up and saying, shoot him, or something like that. Yeah. I mean, that is because he ultimately wants his son to go to paradise, right? There's that song called When We Die as Martyrs, which has Arab children singing this kind of anti-Israel, pro-Palestine song. So it's drummed into them from day one that they're not just victims of war when they get bombed. They're martyrs. They're like heroes who die for a cause. They're born onto. Unfortunately, I have seen some similar kind of insane stuff from pockets of people in Israel and stuff as well, because there are plenty, unfortunately, just as there are in every country, there are plenty of Israelis as well that we've seen during this whole thing. But unfortunately, this systemic brainwashing in schools starts. It's on children's TV in Palestine. Like you turn on children's cartoons and they're talking to them about martyrdom from when they're 3 years old there. It's just completely different.
Yeah, no, there's like tombs and academic texts on this, on the idea of martyrdom in Islamic jihad. It's not a secret. It's not something you need to tiptoe around them. They're proud of it. It's like Christians and Jesus. And that's why it's so hilarious when, people here say, oh, that's offensive, or, don't say that. It's like, no, these are their proudly held beliefs. Why would I not say it? They're happy I'm telling people about this.
Let's talk now about something you mentioned at the start of the stream. Now, you mentioned that Israel is good for advancing animal rights. Do you think that there is, what's called vegan washing or greenwashing, what's going on of Israel? Because that's the accusation that would get leveled at you for that claim. There's apparently vegan washing going on of Israel by Zio-Nazis like yourself, Patricia. And, you don't know what you're talking about. And actually Israelis, they're just they have either the same or even worse attitude to animals as the Palestinians do. Like, what's your take on that?
So just remember, George, the burden. Remember who's making the claim and who has a burden. They're making the claim that Israel is vegan washing. I would say, where's the evidence? And when they don't have any, because they don't, and they just have ad hom attacks and broad statements about vegan washing, then that's all it is. If you don't have like some secret document that you found, Netanyahu, having secret meetings with people, let's get this vegan thing on the road to make us look really good. Why would I believe that it's vegan washing when I see a parade in 2017 of 30,000 activists or more supporting animal rights? Like, did he pay off 30,000 citizens? Like, did he pay off the entire street of, Tel Aviv to have vegan restaurant after vegan restaurant? Did he pay off people to respond so positively to Gary Yourofsky and have him on TV? Like, how big is this conspiracy? Is he going, door knocking on people's houses saying, please act like you're vegan and support animal rights and be really nice to this Gary guy because he's going to give us some really good publicity? Like, it's complete nonsense. Where is the evidence for this? And then on my side, I have a lot of evidence that there's a genuine response to veganism and animal rights principles.
And we see it. We're connected with so many Israeli vegans on social media. It just genuinely does have a good animal rights scene there. And the Israeli activists are doing a lot there to try and create a better world for animals, whether that's in Israel, whether that's in the outer world. The Israeli activists are doing really well to actually mainstream animal rights as something. And there's plenty of Israeli startups as well who are trying to make things like lab-grown meat or like alternative plant-based meats. So it's in terms of animal rights, it's still ultimately backwards like every other country is, but it's got a significant pocket of people there who are actually trying to make a difference. And look, the whole vegan washing thing, the whole greenwashing thing, no vegan is saying that Israel is a vegan country. Far from it. We know it's a country complicit in the animal holocaust, just like everywhere. We're just saying, holy shit, like this is cancerous. It's so detrimental. The contempt for Israelis, the xenophobia, the anti-Semitism that we're seeing within this movement. This is going to negatively impact animals. Because intersectionals are talking about, you know, unless you support human issues, you're not going to get people on board. Why will people sympathize with animal rights if we don't sympathize with them? Well, hang on. You're the one here talking about it's great that hostages are being dragged through the street naked and, oh, fuck Israel. And, you know, I hope Israel gets obliterated from the face of the earth and all this kind of stuff. How is that going to attract any Israelis to the movement?
Yeah. Just, we weren't really going to get so much into the historical side of, you know, this conflict because there's just too much to go into, and there's a lot more in-depth videos on that for people that want to watch from other public figures. But it's so irrelevant to me. Like, if there was a superior ethical alien race that came down on Earth and like took over our cities and made them better, like, I don't care that they colonized us. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're looking
for you,
at
it's about, yeah, for you, it's about who do you want to own the land. It's not about what happened in history. It's like, would you rather this group or this group run the land? Would that be better for animals? Would that be better for humans?
Well, I just think because we don't treat any other or many other conflicts this way, as in who colonized who first, because if we did, then Muslims today might have to return land back to the Arab slaves that they owned.
Right.
Like, you know, so I don't think there's any legitimacy in looking at historical land claims, especially when they go so far back, and especially when we don't hold those standards across, you know, different things. So the real question is, who's the best person or best state to govern this strip of land or this country? If it's aliens coming down, then yeah, maybe we should give it up to them. They can do a way better job than us. Is it Israel or a terrorist organization? Like, it's a very simple thing.
Yeah, it just seems so obvious, doesn't it? It's like, if you're talking about, they're talking about a hashtag. I mean, let's just focus on the animal rights thing. If you're talking about what's better for the animals and, you know, we need to be anti-Israel to help the animals, but how is hashtag Free Palestine? Well, a Free Palestine is going to unfortunately be run by Hamas. It's not going to be run by a progressive group. That's not going to be a good place for either human rights or animal rights. So if veganism is intersectional, if veganism is about rights for humans and animals and how they're intertwined, I don't understand the argument as to why they wouldn't want Israel to run that strip of land. That kind of makes just no sense to me. That seems very irrational when you're talking about veganism being intersectional. Yeah,
and let's face it, these people aren't really animal rights people. Like, they're masking their interest in animal rights to promote all these other stupid fucking ideas.
Right.
Like, I've seen like trans or whatever activists defend their support of Hamas, and when they're criticized because, you know, Hamas would kill them because they're gay, because in Islamic Jihad that's not tolerated.
Right.
They say crazy things like, I don't even feel safe in America, so why should I hate the Hamas government? Because I'm like, you would literally be thrown off a building in the Hamas government. Like, you wouldn't be allowed to live.
And it's weird because just another thing that is easily observable here, they're talking about safe spaces and feeling unsafe and stuff like that. Many of these intersectional types who say they feel unsafe in vegan spaces with people who support this and people who support that, they will then go on pro-Palestine marches and just march hand in hand with any Tom, Dick and Harry they don't know who's a homophobe or a transphobe or believes that gay rights is a sin punishable by death in Islam. These people are at pro-Palestine marches every single day. In the West, you get people who believe in death penalty for gays. And these intersectionals are marching proudly hand in hand with these people who in a vegan, well, who we wouldn't even allow in a vegan space. And we're not intersectional, right? If someone's coming into my animal rights group and saying death to the gays, I don't want them in the group. And I'm not even an intersectional. But these people are feeling
Oh my God! Did you hear Patricia Nonis is in this group? I'm feeling unsafe. I feel marginalized because she's a Zion Nazi or whatever.
Have you seen those viral videos of like pro Hamas protesters and LGBT to trans whatever clashing with each other, and then the Hamas people saying you can't sit with us basically, and it's like, well, we're here to support you. They're like, no, fuck off.
Oh my God! I don't
It's just
think
like welcome to the fucking circus. Like, where are we in the world right now?
I haven't seen that, but
Yeah, and they're like, they'll rip down the pride flag and they'll like piss on it and spit on it and stuff. It's like, well, these are your friends apparently.
Oh, there was one other observation I wanted to make about the greenwashing, actually. Yeah. I think greenwashing or vegan washing, whatever, it can come from any side. People can do it about anything, right? About a group that they support. But I'm actually seeing more of it on the anti-Israel side with Palestinians, right? Have you noticed the romanticizing of Gazans with their treatment of animals? Oh, look at the Gazans, they're helping all the poor animals being bombed by the IDF. Oh, the courageous, heroic Gazans, they're so amazing. Look at them helping all these animals being bombed by the evil, bad IDF. And then the minute that you mentioned to them, actually those animals were bred into a life of brutal slavery and oppression by the Gazans. And if they survived the bombings, which are horrific, obviously, if they were to survive the bombings, they were just going to have their throats slit at the Eid al-Adha festival. Oh, suddenly now you're a racist and a Nazi that you've dared mention that Palestinians, God forbid, oppress and enslave and abuse animals. So that's the greenwashing, the vegan washing that I'm seeing in the animal rights movement is actually coming from the anti-Israel side much more than it is. Because even if you dare even question that, you're shot down. It's like they're trying to build this like force field around Palestinians that protect them from the idea that they are complicit in animal oppression.
Yeah. It's like everything they're claiming Israel are doing, they're actually doing. Like, I think they have genocidal intentions towards the Jewish people. That's in their charter that they want to kill the Jews. The charter got updated, I think, in 2017, but in the original charter, it was very clear, like the anti-Semitism. They use human shields. That should end the story right there. That one side uses human shields and the other side doesn't use human shields. I don't think we've seen a more. This is what's so crazy about this whole demonizing Israel thing. Like, there's never been a more moral army. There's never been a more army that's willing to use restraint than Israel does. There's footage and evidence online of Israel like roof knocking. I don't know if you know what that is. It's where they shake the building before they bomb it, so people have time to leave. When and no other war would you be expected to treat an enemy this way. Like, they use so much restraint, and the opposite is portrayed in the media and amongst these like nutcases, basically. But there's never been a more moral army.
Let me just press you on that, because we see the pictures from Gaza and it is being absolutely flattened. We're seeing refugee camps get bombed. We're seeing schools, hospitals get bombed. We're seeing the place just get absolutely obliterated to the ground. Why is it that Israel aren't sending in like just special forces alone to like rescue these hostages and stuff? If they're the world's most moral army, why is it that they're absolutely obliterating the place and there's all these civilian casualties? Because that's, I think, the thing that is so swaying people to be anti-Israel and see them. Because Hamas, right, they launch rockets at Israel every bloody day. And if it weren't for the Iron Dome, Israel, let's face it, would be a smouldering wreck if Israel didn't have that Iron Dome defense system.
Yeah.
But I just want to press you on that point that Israel is the most moral army, because the point that people will pick you up on there, Patricia, is the bits that I just mentioned. They'll but say, well, we're not seeing this though. We're just seeing children just being absolutely obliterated throughout the whole area.
Yeah, so part of the answer is in issues that we already covered. But first of all, Hamas deliberately hide amongst places that are hard to get to. They have all these, I don't know if you know about their tunnels.
Of course,
kilometers and kilometers of tunnels that purposefully hide in schools and hospitals and use human shields. So I don't know what you expect apart from the place to get obliterated. Then there's when the attacks first started happening, I saw it for myself, the IDF and Israel's you know, the IDF and other people putting out these announcements saying, we are going to hit this, you have 1 week to evacuate. Like, I saw it myself. So people are intentionally staying there as well because, as we discussed, they want to die. And I've also seen footage of, they call it like Pallywood, people making it look worse than it actually is. And yeah, I know bombs are bad, so they're going to cause a lot of destruction. But still, when you look at it in comparison to other wars, they're still doing a lot of things that no other person would be expected to do. What other army in the world that was involved in a war has given notice once, like, in a week, I'm going to bomb this place? The fact that they even do some of it some of the time is amazing to me. And of course, there's going to be, they have one of the most advanced armies in the world. There's going to be a lot of damage if people don't move out of the way, especially.
Yeah, I mean, one of the funny things about a lot of the people enacting these kind of cancellation campaigns in the movement is they kind of assume that none of us in the West have any family who have gone through this hardship themselves, but they completely ignore that Germans or British people, both their countries got absolutely flattened during World War II. And yeah, there were no special forces going in to like, you know, neatly do this and do that. Like, there were no leaflet drops saying we're going to bomb this area, you must evacuate to this area, which I have actually seen footage of happening. So none of this happened between Germany and Great Britain during World War II. But I guess just the well, maybe we can talk about this as well, actually. The idea of I think one point you mentioned was, how would Hamas act towards Israel if Hamas had the power that Israel had? Because I think one of the things that is turning so many people in our movement fully against Israel and just dangerously Hamas in many cases is this idea of proportionality. And well, Hamas only did this October the 7th, but Israel is just now, you know, they're murdering, 10 times the amount of people that died on October the 7th within the space of however long. So talk to me about that, the issue of proportionality and what Hamas would do if it had the power that Israel had, and try to tie it in also to how this mentality could harm animals as well, if you can think of how to do that as well, because that could be interesting.
So that's Sam Harris, another one of Sam Harris's point. He makes the argument that, and I agree, that Hamas and most Palestinians have made it very clear that they want Jews wiped off the map. And that's true for most of the surrounding Arab states, maybe not Saudi Arabia now, because they're getting a little more modern and they're getting certain perks from the US by getting along with them, basically. And this is why this whole thing happened in the first place. Like, these proxies of Iran are attacking Israel. So there's no kind of people getting along in that region with Israel. So Hamas is a proxy of Iran, and Iran has all these little proxies and they're all anti-Semitic. And one of their goals is to wipe Israel off the map, and it's always been. So this whole idea of proportionality makes sense, but also you need to consider that you can't judge how bad someone is in a war based on how many people they killed. So, for example, in the Second World War, the British Army killed a lot more Nazis than the Nazis killed Brits. So does that make, does that make the Nazis better, or does that make the British people worse than the Nazis because they killed more? So that's not a good measure of morality. In war, the rules are just different. You could have a smaller amount of people killing a large amount of people, but the people are worse because of the things they believe, and that would still be better. So that's more of an accurate way to approach this. It's not just, and this is why utilitarianism fails. Like, this is another example of why having, this is just the most amount of utility drained, therefore it's the worst. It's like, well, no, Hamas are kind of shitty people. They have shitty ideas. It's probably, the world is not going to be a better place if they're alive. It's probably going to be a better place if they're dead. So therefore, that's how we should.
Including for animals.
Including for animals, yes, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, so that's how we can, I guess, tie it back into animal rights as well.
Yeah. Animals
are going to be better off with people who have their interests that are alive. And I don't think Hamas are its supporters. I don't think that's even in the realm of things they care about. They don't give a shit about animals, even more so than other people.
Yeah. Yeah. And not to vegan wash the IDF here, but there are a significant number of IDF soldiers who are actually vegan. I don't think I've ever heard one single animal rights message from a Hamas militant.
No,
So
they would laugh at people like me and you. Like they would think we were complete idiots, like wasting our time. And like, who are animals? You know, everything just goes by the Quran. They believe everything's by the book.
Right.
It's the gospel to them. So yeah.
Whereas the IDF is, it seems to be a mixture. There are some crazy like Orthodox Zionists in there who think that Jews are the God's chosen people and we have the right to the land and all that kind of bullshit that obviously me and you don't believe in. But it's mainly, from what I can see, actually a secular army of people who there's and just mixed religion army. There's Muslims who serve in the IDF as well. So it seems to be like a mixed. It just seems to be about defending Israel's existence and interests rather than about we have right to the land as God's chosen people, which is actually more what Hamas, I think, is actually doing. So the Orthodox Jews who are Zionists from the religious perspective do exist. And there are many backwards people in Israel who just do think that, I don't know, Palestinians should be expelled from their homes because they're not God's chosen people. Now, fuck those people. I don't care about the people who are trying to do that. But it seems to be the case that it's actually Hamas who a higher percentage of just believe that these are Muslim lands. This is the idea that God has designated this land to us.
Yeah.
So there's even the argument that even if we're looking at it from the context of, a group of people who are trying to say that God has given them right to the land, I think the argument could actually be better made that it's more Hamas who are actually doing that, and how that could spell disaster, obviously, for animals if we talk about this conflict.
Yeah, we're looking at a mostly secular army with there's always going to be some religious people against. Right. On average, the average person in Palestine is going to support Hamas because they are also fundamentally religious, like extremely religious. So that's also another, conflict that's taking place. And adding to my proposition that Israel is the most moral army in the world is the fact that there are a lot of vegan men in the army as well, and the army cater and explicitly advertise to the soldiers to become more vegan. Like they have vegan leather, they have vegan wool. Like not many places, not many militaries, if any, would offer this, I think, especially when they started doing it, which was like 5 or 6 years ago now.
And don't you also think that intersectionals massively trivialize animal rights when they kind of shoot down stuff like that? They will listen to this stream right now and they'll be like, oh my God, that disgusting Patricia Nonis. She supports what the IDF are doing just because there's more vegans in the army or something like that. It's like when they say that, they're kind of making a mockery of the idea that animal rights actually matter. Like, imagine if they did that about any other group.
I know. Imagine if they gave heaps of money to like ending child slavery or something. Just because they do that, it's like, well, it's pretty fucking ridiculous.
Oh, the IDF aren't paedophiles.
Wow.
Right. Like, it would just sound so ridiculous if said about any other group. But when it's animals, we talk about intersectionality and the idea of consistent anti-oppression. Well, if you're consistent anti-oppression, that means you absolutely have to take into account a factor of which army has a higher percentage of vegans or people trying to advance animal rights. You can't just like poo-poo that and kind of just shoot it down as if it doesn't matter.
It's so important because we had that stream recently about how I think we need more masculinity and more men in the movement, and Israel is providing exactly that. And to shoot down what I think is one of the most important things that we need, it's just fucking stupid to me. I don't know if you saw my video explaining why I think this is like a good dynamic of like very toxic femininity and virtuous masculinity, which is what I see. Yeah, the IDF has. I do think they are exhibiting what I see as virtuous masculine traits. Like it's moral force. It's not force that's meant to oppress. They're defending their people. and they're doing it intelligently. And so that's what I see as masculine virtue. And on the other side, we're getting all this like slander, genocide, racist, apartheid, and that's technically what females who are not of the most morally virtuous personalities tend to do. And that's their strongest weapon, I think, is just slander.
And they're also and mixed with those what we would call toxic, like third wave feminist traits or whatever, if we're going to talk in those terms. They're also, along with that, using toxic masculinity, which is the thing that they always go on about. Oh, toxic masculinity and blah, blah, blah. Hamas, why aren't they accusing Hamas as well of actually engaging in toxic masculinity as well? I don't get why these aren't, because
Islamic societies are the most toxically masculine, or the only toxically masculine ones left, and they don't get called as such ever. Like, have you ever heard someone talking about toxic masculinity amongst Muslim men or something? Right. Apart from Ayaan Hirsi Ali, maybe, like anyone else
Exactly. That point about Ayaan Hirsi Ali, that kind of segues beautifully into my next point that I wanted to raise, because I wanted to make an analogy here. We wanted to talk on this stream about the difference between anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, because people think that they're the same thing. And I think that's causing a lot of confusion among people. I guess we would like to put forward the point that they're actually two different things.
Wait, do people actually think anti-Semitism is Islamophobia? Like, they don't know the difference between Jew hatred and hatred of Muslims?
They're saying, well, let me tell you what they're saying. They're saying that they're both the same kind of, like, criticism of, how do I put this? All right, let me just make my analogy, because that will better hash it out. They don't realize that Islam is not a race, right? So they associate Islamophobia as bad as anti-Semitism, because they're confusing Islamophobia with racism, aren't they? Rather than just the attacking of ideas.
Ideas, yeah.
Right. Now, here's the thing. Islamophobia, as it's called, is just the attacking of ideas in the same way. Now, I'm not saying that people should hate a group just because of who they are, whatever. It's just the same. If someone says, I hate Muslims, that is bad, but it's no different from saying I hate Trump supporters, right? It's just the same thing. It's like I hate a group because of their ultimate.
There's an idea they have that you don't like. Exactly.
With anti-Semitism, that actually has the racial element, and it's not so much to do with the ideology. And I'm just going to make my analogy here. Assuming that the Nazis were rounding up Muslims during World War II and killing them, Ayaan Hirsi Ali would be safe because she's renounced Islam. She's an ex-Muslim. Okay. So you can do that in Islam and be safe. The Islamophobes won't get you. Right, if you renounce Islam, it's not your race, it's just the ideas that you have. So Ayaan Hirsi Ali, as an ex-Muslim, would be safe under Nazi rule. Oh, you've renounced it. We're not going to gas you, Ayaan. Right? Anne Frank would still be murdered whether she was an atheist or not, because she has Jewish DNA. She's a racial Jew. So the Nazis would kill Anne Frank, even if she said, I think Judaism is a load of crap. Right, Hitler would still be like, you can say all you want, Anne. We're still putting you in the gas chamber because you are a Jew.
Yeah. She would have to go get a time machine and travel in time and find someone that can change DNA to not be a Jew.
Exactly. So people are confusing. The left is very confused. They think Islamophobia and anti-Semitism are this same kind of thing. They're like, oh my God, imagine what you just said there, criticizing Muslims for believing that. Imagine if you swapped that with Jews, whatever. And it's like, well, okay, it is actually, well, number one, it is fine to criticize things Jews do in the name of Judaism, like the Kaparot slaughter that they do every year where they mass murder the chickens and stuff. So number one, I would do that anyway. And number two, no, it's completely, when people say that, anti-Semitism and Islamophobia are the same thing, they're absolutely not. One is racial, one is just solely to do with politics, like Trumpism.
Right. I'm really glad you brought this up, because I think some radical Muslims, or some, maybe even some well-intentioned ones, when they try and pass these laws that include Muslims under like racial discrimination, or, you know, when they're trying to have these vilification laws that you can't vilify Islam, they are stopping you from criticizing ideas. They are not stopping you from criticizing a race or a person. And it shouldn't be included in the same thing, because it's absolutely not. One is simply a set of ideas like any other religion, and one is a physical attribute of a person. Yeah, I think that's a very important distinction. And people don't understand. They think, they'll call you a racist for criticizing Muslims. And it's like, yeah, sweetheart, it's not a race. Like, let's start there.
Yeah, and Islam is one of the world's whitest religions, by the way. It's like the second whitest religion behind Christianity. There's entirely white Muslim countries like Bosnia, Albania, for example. There's entire Muslim regions of Russia that are white, like Dagestan, for example.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's that like they kind of just sweep all this under the carpet to suit some kind of agenda. I don't know why they associate Islam with brown skin. But Islam is nothing to do with brown skin. It's to do with the brain. It's no different to criticizing Trumpism, the Tories, anything like that. These people are happy to sling shit around about the Tories, about Trump supporters. But then the minute Muslims are criticized for their behavior, oppressive behavior in any regard, you're a racist because you're an Islamophobe. And no, it's completely... it's just one of the stupidest ideas we have infecting the West.
It's so funny, just to go full circle back to anti-white hatred. It's like you can be racist towards Muslims, but not towards a white person who actually has a race.
Right. One of the best observations. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that could be a great status. If you ever feel stupid, just remember there are people in the world who think you can't be racist towards white people, but you can be racist towards Muslims.
Yeah, that's great. You put it better, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I should maybe tweet that, or X that, as it's called. Moving on now. Let's talk about horseshoe theory for a little bit.
Yeah.
Can you explain what horseshoe theory is to people who don't know what it is? And could you also maybe try and tie that as well into how this, in the current light of affairs, could maybe negatively harm animals?
So my simplified version of horseshoe theory is there is a political spectrum. There's right, there's left, there's middle, there's other ones. But you can go so right and so left where they meet up like a horseshoe. So I think we sort of touched on it already by talking about some extreme right-wingers who actually align. And we saw it happening before October 7th happened. We could see very radical Muslims were starting to align with very conservative America. And I think one of the few good things that came out of October 7th was conservative Jews like Ben Shapiro kind of stepped in and said, well, this is kind of crazy. And then we saw that, but there was actually like a alliance kind of building up between them, not really anymore. But that kind of shed light on how horseshoe theory works, because the ideas get so extreme. Left-wing authoritarianism meets right-wing authoritarianism, basically. And if that manifested in some way for us and took over our liberal democracies, for example, we wouldn't have free speech and the things that we need to advocate for animals. Because free speech is essential to any society. And it's essential for our goal, our objectives of animal rights. Because if you take away our free speech, how the fuck are we going to defend the interests of non-human animals?
Yeah, and the further a society goes left or right, the further it deviates from the truth, I guess, because when you go to the extreme left or the extreme right, and this is what's happening, this is the horseshoe theory we're seeing coming into practice, the far left are turning into the far right are morphing with the far left and this kind of thing, like on the anti-Israel hatred, everything like that. You're going to have a pro-censorship society, an authoritarian society, a society that just says everything must be done this way and not that way. That is going to be, in a carnist system, the animal holocaust is going to continue forever, and dissenters are going to be persecuted for that.
Yeah, it's about the maintaining of power over others, whereas in a liberal society you have a balance of power and liberty. But did you see recently Candace Owens, who I consider to be very far right, like way off the chain and a little bit crazy? She was fired from the Daily Wire for a number of reasons, I suspect, but she was saying anti-Israel sentiments as well. And then another girl who was very far left-wing recently rolled her eyes. I think her name's like Brie or something like that. She rolled her eyes while talking to a parent of one of the hostages. And the parent of the hostage was saying we should believe, these rape victims. And this girl was like, oh. It's like, it was pretty bad. And then that got like 1 million views and she was fired from her place. I think it was called The Hill or The Conversation Hill or something like that. It's a pretty left outlet. And now Candace is like, I really want to interview you. And because they're both anti-Semitic, I guess. I don't know.
Oh my God. So they're like buddying up. Right. Okay. Well,
they're both conservative black women. And it's like, I just think it's a very good example of horseshoe theory. They're bonding over their supposed, because they feel oppressed by the Jewish elite. Right. So that's another thing that the right wing, like this extreme right wing of America, have this theory that they're enslaved by the Jewish race because a lot of people that are in power happen to be Jewish or Jewish American, and they want to be free from the Jewish master race or something like that.
Right. Well,
so,
the Israeli Olympic attacks as well. Another great case of horseshoe theory coming into play. The Islamist militant groups, pro-Palestinian militant groups supported by the far left, teaming up, buddying up with the far right to commit the attacks on the Israeli athletes in Munich. You couldn't write this shit. Right, Pat, we're going to have a bit of fun now because we're now going to view some speeches at some animal rights events recently that were anti-Israel speeches at animal rights events. So let's have a look.
Embarrassing. It's getting hard to tell people I'm even vegan because of the politics in the vegan movement. I will never not use the word vegan because I don't believe in like cucking to society's understanding of a word when that's not what it is.
Right.
But every time I look at these people, I'm just like, anyway, one benefit of like being a vegan and being amongst a crowd of people who are mostly intellectually retarded is that it makes you really objective. Be like, oh no, these principles are still really good. I can see that even though these people surrounding me are like infinitely stupid.
Yeah.
With the exception of like 5 vegans that I like.
Right. Okay. This first one that we're going to view is on the page Animal Rights for Palestine. So I'm just going to get my screen up now. Animal Rights for Palestine. All right. And I'm going to play the video now and then I'll stop it at certain points and we'll
Why is it always like this text and these kind of colors? Like it's always the same. And when all these banned white supremacy ones came out, look exactly the same.
Yeah. They do like these little fonts, don't they? Okay, right. Let's take a look at this.
They've claimed that this is a movement that when people go hard for Palestine, it's because on the inside they're actually anti-Semitic. I want to say, I know, right? I want to say right now that I'm here because I love Palestine. I'm here because I love Palestinians. I love my Arab siblings. I love my Muslim siblings. I'm not here because I hate.
Okay, but do they love you in return? Because the simple answer is that they probably don't. In fact, I've seen some YouTube videos of people being interviewed in Gaza saying, would you accept support from, the LGBT community and stuff in the West? And they're just like, no, we do not want this support. So it's kind of funny there when she's talking about...
They're so open about their views. So it's crazy that they just refuse to see it.
Right.
Hate my Jewish siblings. I'm here because I love my Jewish siblings. I'm here because my love motivates me to take radical action. And this radical action doesn't care about the feelings of people who are supporting genocide.
Unless they support Hamas.
Have you noticed it's never like explaining why it's a genocide? It's just accept that it is. And there's no debate about like the statistics or the facts, population dynamics or anything like that.
This radical action and my radical love doesn't care that you're trying to smear my character, doesn't care that you're trying to take other people down with me. And my radical love that leads to my radical activism will defeat your radical hate.
Woo! Yes!
Pat, which side has the hatred all come from during this whole time? Since October the 7th?
Yeah, I thought it was so funny. She said character attacks. And like, that's all you do. That's all you spend your time doing.
Right. Just the pure toxicity, the pure hatred has only come from one side of this debate during the whole time that this has happened. We've just seen it from one side of the movement, so much that they're literally talking about it at animal rights event and turning their hatred for Israel, their hatred for vegans who are Zio-Nazis, into speeches that instead should be used up for animals.
It's always like there's a white liberal women type as well. Like they're really failing America so badly. I've been meaning to talk more and more about it and make like a proper video on it. But this particular demographic is just, have you seen that meme where it's like, who's going to lead us to World War III? And it's like Kim Jong-un, Putin, and then there's like a group of white. They're just not in touch with reality and what's happening.
Right.
It's crazy.
If you can't live in a world, if you do not live in a world where you think that Palestinians are deserving of this radical love, you live in a world that's dominated by racism. Woo! If you can't see what we're doing here right now as something...
Okay, so no vegan, unless they're completely nuts, on the pro-Israel or even on the two-siding side, is saying that Palestinians deserve to die or whatever unless they're Hamas. Their position is actually, so she's strawmanning the position here. Their position is actually largely that these Palestinians are being brainwashed and used as child soldiers and child shields by Hamas. She's not condemning Hamas anywhere in this speech for their hatefulness, for their vile contempt towards Jews, towards their own people, for brainwashing them from day one to die as martyrs, for their stupid... for this stupid war that they're just tossing them into from birth. So, again, this is just something that she's fallen completely silent on here.
That is motivated purely by love. Your view of Palestinians and of the world is overshadowed by hate.
Woo!
There's no question about it. You have a Nazi animal rights activist in a room with a Zionist animal rights activist. You don't have two animal rights activists. You have two racists.
Yes.
Animal rights activists are not racist.
Yes.
Animal rights activists constantly overcome their own in-learned racism to be the best animal rights activists.
Okay, again, all the racism that we've seen in the movement has just come from one side of this. It's always from the intersectionals. You don't see racism in our movement come from any other side apart from theirs, whether it's the violent anti-Semitism that they espouse, whether it's the complete silence, remember silence is violence, over the anti-Semitic hate crimes perpetuated by black supremacist groups, including BLM, whether it's just the toxic and spiteful anti-white hatred, whether it's the calling black people sellouts and, you know, all these other like spiteful names, Uncle Tom and stuff, all these other spiteful names they have for black people who have a different political opinion. All of this is coming from them, and she's just, and it's funny again. She's using this whole. I love how she uses the Nazi in this. The Nazi would be at this rally clapping along to the speech like "fuck Israel," yeah. And she's talking about that. Oh, it's just so comedic that they don't.
And like vegans can absolutely be racist. Like a lot of them are anti-white racist, so that's just factually not true. And it's logically not. She's displaying like a complete lack of like understanding of rationality and logic, because you can actually absolutely be any kind of racist and still be animal rights. Just how you can be an animal abuser and be non-racist.
I'd like to ask this woman, can you be pro-Palestine if you're not vegan? I wonder if she's going to tell the Gazans that, but of course she won't.
That they can possibly be. There is no such thing as a racist animal rights activist, full stop. Our movement is not welcoming to racists, and Zionism is racism.
Yeah.
We cannot allow the animal rights movement to be co-opted by covert white.
Co-opted. Amazing. That is beautiful. Oh, who's doing the co-opting here? I wonder.
They always seem so unhappy, and like I don't want to comment on looks or anything, but like very unattractive all the time. Like I've never seen, I don't know, apart from like celebrities that just simp for Palestine because they want, you know, the youth of their audience to support them and they want Gen Z to still like them. I don't really see many like happy looking.
Well, that's
SJWs.
Well, SJWs are just completely driven by hatred, bitterness, and stuff. So it's you know, they are just very
unhappy and hateful people, I guess.
But sometimes you see before pictures and they're kind of hot, and then like they go to uni in 4 years, they come out with like dyed hair and just look, yeah. Anyway.
Right.
Supremacists within our movement, and we don't need to make them feel welcome. We don't. It's not our responsibility. It's not my responsibility as a white person to make other white people feel comfortable when they fuck up in the animal rights movement. And I will never do it. I won't. And I absolutely encourage you all to never make space in the animal rights movement for people who are enacting racism, for people who are making our beloved Palestinian and Arab and Muslim siblings feel unwelcome within the animal rights movement. The only...
What is this?
Who's doing that? Who is trying to make... We're the ones trying to make everyone feel welcome in the movement. If anything, Mrs. fucking white, liberal, leftist, Western woman, you are the one who would actually be making Muslims feel unwelcome in your movement, because 99% of Muslims think your ideas about everything are a load of utter shit. And you're the one who's saying that you can't be vegan if you're that. You can't be vegan if you're this, blah, blah, blah. We're the ones who want everyone to be a part of the movement, no matter what their political ideology is. It's this woman who would actually be ostracizing Muslims from the movement, because Muslims, by and large, have overwhelmingly conservative views that go against her anti-patriarchal, pro-choice, pro-gay marriage ideology.
Can you imagine her sitting around a table trying to present to like a Hamas committee?
Oh my God. Right.
People who are making division, the only people who are splitting the animal rights movement apart are Zionists.
Right. That is just hilarious. The only people trying to split the animal rights movement apart are the people who actually aren't doing anything to split the animal rights movement apart. They're just sharing their opinion. I haven't heard a single Zionist vegan, by the way, say, get the fuck out of the movement if you believe this. Get the fuck out of the movement if you believe that. It's only these idiots.
You know what I think as well, just quick, this is a speculation. I think it is a real, almost like a financial loss of vegans for not being openly Israel and openly Jewish, because I don't have a big platform. And I got some pretty generous donations, not that I asked for it or anything, from like quite wealthy Jewish people for being so outspoken. And I was thinking, if I got that and I don't have a very large platform, what are other activists, vegan activists, missing out on, so to speak, by not like, especially if they genuinely do support Israel? You know what I mean? Because I've talked to some people with pretty large platforms who say, yeah, I agree, but you know, I don't want to piss off, I don't want to like lose this money. But I think there's actually potentially a financial loss, because a lot of Jewish people are rich, have fuckloads of money to just give, do have really good hearts. So I just wanted to put that out there for like the people that I've spoken to that say I'm scared of being cancelled. It's like, well, there's a parallel argument, and that is you actually might be losing money from people that are willing to, you know, because they're so grateful, a lot of the Jews, because they know not many people want to say stuff because they're scared of like women like this, I guess. Yeah. So just putting that out there for anyone watching who's worried they're going to lose money for like for siding with Jews or Israel.
Right.
If you choose Zionism over your animal rights activism, you are not an animal rights activist. You are a racist using animal rights activism to cover your racism. Period.
That's interesting. Yeah. So these intersectionals are basically using the animal rights movement to push their own political narratives and screw over animals and animal rights. She's now accusing Zionists of doing this in the movement, where we're literally not seeing this happen at all. If there is some kind of Zionist who is literally using the animal rights movement to peddle Zionism, then fuck that person. But I haven't even seen that. The only thing I've seen is these people use the animal rights movement to peddle their anti-Israel agenda. And that's why they constantly use animals to dunk on Israel, right? They're saying, they're even teaming up with non-vegans, commenting on vegan pages saying, why aren't you posting about the animals being bombed by the IDF? And then the minute you test whether to see they're actually in this for the animals by saying, you mean the animals being enslaved by the Gazans, their whole thing falls apart. Yeah. So again, it's them who are co-opting this movement.
I wonder if you've heard, I've just thought of an interesting parallel. I don't know if you've heard this kind of critique on wokeism and SJWs and all this nonsense that we're talking about, there's this real dislike from elites, because a lot of these people are from elite institutions and have Ivy League degrees and, you know, XYZ. There's this inherent dislike of just decent, ordinary people, like cops, like working class people, which is what we're really meant to be about. If they cared about human injustice, I think, you know, that is one issue, the working class. I wonder if that's something that can be observed here as well. Like, do they just genuinely dislike successful people who are also happen to be moral? Like, who also happen to, like, they can't understand that someone might just be successful and also genuinely care about animals. Like, that's not something they could actually accept or understand. Does that make sense? In the same way that people don't like cops because they couldn't believe like a working class person just wants to like protect his community or her community.
Yeah, it's like, I think they project their own lack of empathy kind of onto others. They assume, the reason I think that many of these people just assume white people to all be racist, for example, and be, you know, suspicious of black people walking through stores or something like that. I think it's because they think that. I think it's that, like, they grew up being the type of people who, if they saw a black person, they'd cross the other side of the street or something. So they just assume that I think that also or something. Because that's what I think when I see a black person walking on the same side of the street. So this is what I think, that this is the reason why I think a lot of these people have these kind of spiteful, contemptful views towards white people and so on, or Jews or whoever it is, because I think they ultimately project their own prejudices onto us and think, well, I'm like this, or I grew up like this, so I'm just going to assume that other people are like this, when it's not the case.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I don't know who said it, but it was something like these minorities, these like elite liberal people defend, if they were crossing the street, they would not cross the street to be near them or something like that. I kind of butchered it, but just saying how like they don't see them as equals, but it's just, instead of saying what they really think, it comes out in a different way, like very patronizing.
Absolutely. All right.
The ultimate goal of the animal rights movement and of all progressive movements in coordination is decolonializing the world and defeating the spirit of imperialism globally.
Well, fucking hell, you talk about you butchered something you said a moment ago, Pat. Well, don't worry, this woman just butchered the whole entire meaning of animal rights. What is she talking about?
So, just to make it clear, decolonization would mean adopting the values of the people that were colonized. And often that means unfair gender values. It means child brides. It just means the most fucked up shit that you could think of, because you would be going back to a time when those people were in power before they were colonized. So decolonization, the entire meaning of it, would result in horrific consequences.
For animals as well.
And for animals, obviously.
Right.
We will not have animal liberation unless we defeat imperialism. We will not defeat imperialism if we have racists in the animal rights movement.
We will not have a free Palestine unless all Palestinians are vegan. You know, it's never like, she'll never say that in reverse. It's always, we have to submit to this in order for, if we want veganism to take off. But they never bring this energy to other movements. I would love to see this woman at a pro-Palestine rally saying all this, but about animal rights, and saying a big fuck you to anyone in the crowd here who is an animal oppressor. We will never have a free Palestine unless the animals are free from the concentration camps worldwide.
It's about her. It's not about anyone else, really.
Exactly.
What's about she would debate a person that wasn't white who held a different view from her, like myself or somebody else? Like, there's zero chance of that ever happening. It's also hilarious about these people. They won't engage or have their ideas challenged by someone who isn't white, because they're going to get exposed.
Right.
Badly.
Oh, that would be so good to see. Okay, carrying on.
Discourage and dissolve Zionism within the animal rights movement. Thank you.
Oh, there we go. That was pure cancer. Okay, we'll move on to the next one now. So the next one we've got for you guys, this was at NARD, one of the NARDs in India. So this is National Animal Rights Day, and this speech is by Durga B. Let's listen to Durga B's speech here, and we'll do some running commentary on that.
Right. It is about freedom and justice for all animals. At this point, there is a genocide happening towards animals and humans, and unfortunately, hardly anyone is talking about it.
Hardly anyone's talking about it.
No, I never see it.
It's all we can people can't shut up about it. It's all that's on our news feed. Carrying on.
And nobody is able to stop it. So I feel like the least we can do is talk about the oppression and the countless innocent lives that have been lost in the Palestine, and many more that are being lost right now. I'm going to read parts of a statement published by Apex Advocacy, which is addressed to the mainstream animal rights organization. Dear animal rights movement, you have failed. You have failed the values which you profess: compassion, empathy, justice, equality, morality. You have failed them all. You have failed all those people who believed you when you said you were dedicated to the liberation of the vulnerable, the exploited, and the forgotten. You have failed the decades of activists and organizers who came before you and laid the foundation for what was supposed to have been the greatest peace movement in the world. Palestine was your litmus test, and you have failed.
All right, what are your thoughts so far, Patricia, on what she's saying about Palestine being our litmus test and veganism being the greatest peace movement in the world? What are your thoughts so far on what she's saying? An animal rights march, by the way. This is an animal rights march, and she's made her speech about Palestine, just like the intersectionals threatened to do. She actually followed through with that threat, and she decided to actually do it. What are your thoughts so far?
Yeah, so the only way I could, it's like, she's obviously fucked in the head, but the only way I can say it is I'm one of the most pro-Israel people I know, but I would not go to an animal rights event and give a speech about being pro-Jewish or pro-Israel because I'm there for animals. So she's making it something it's not even about, as intersectionals always do. And she's trying to make the peace movement. Is she calling the peace movement about animals or about Palestine? Is she saying Palestine is peaceful?
Well,
Hamas is one of the most violent terrorist groups on the planet. So I don't know. I don't know how to respond to these people. Like, they're out of their fucking minds.
Yeah. She's basically saying veganism is a peace movement and it should therefore be about the freedom of Palestine. I think that's what she's saying.
That doesn't follow.
We'll carry on.
And because of all of this failure, you have failed the animals. Why the silence? Aren't we, the animal rights movement, the ones who always speak out against injustice? Are we not the movement?
Okay, the good thing about this march is that she's not getting anyone clapping her throughout, unlike that other one before. So props to the Indian activists who are present here. I think they're all looking around at each other like, bro, what the fuck
As far as I know, Indians are very pro-Israel. That's what I thought. So maybe it's the wrong crowd for her.
Modi is pro-Israel, I think, but I think opinion across Indians, just like anywhere, is quite mixed. And I think most Indian animal rights activists, maybe they might even sway towards Palestine. I'm not sure, actually, because they might even see analogies.
We talked to Vegan King about this because he's from India and he's really across the different caste systems and different classes. Right. And I know veganism is considered like a white thing because there's like upper class people who are vegetarian.
Right.
And it's looked at as almost like white veganism here or something like that. So I actually don't know. But I keep on seeing things on Twitter, X, that show overwhelmingly Indians tend to be pro-Israel and really love Israel. So I don't know. Maybe that's an exaggeration.
Yeah, I guess it just depends where they fall politically. I think, there are plenty of kind of woke left Indians. And there are also Indians who might see a parallel between the creation of Israel and the creation of Pakistan and Bangladesh within their own country, which was also set up by a British mandate. So they might see parallels there. I think it's pretty mixed, but yeah, maybe a chat with Vegan King should be good. Anyway, we digress. Let's
back to this.
that speaks for the most ignored and preferably forgotten? Is it our movement supposed to be about non-violence and kindness towards all as in literally everyone? Perhaps you are not moved by the trauma-drenched tears and blood-soaked rage of Palestinian humans and animals. Perhaps even the scores upon scores of rubble-covered, starved, maimed cats, dogs, birds, donkeys, sheep, and horses who find themselves mired in a crisis fueled entirely by the insanity of human nature will not compel you to utter.
So all those animals there that she mentioned are enslaved by Palestinians and are bred for slavery, for pulling around carts, for pulling around humans, for doing farm work, for being slaughtered, for barbaric animal sacrifice in the streets for festivals like Eid al-Adha, where the rivers, where the streets run red in rivers of blood in Gaza when they massacre animals every single year. She hasn't mentioned that at all. She hasn't.
As Gary Yourofsky originally pointed out, she needs to watch Gary Yourofsky's video that's not online anymore, but the one talking about Palestinians and Israel, because that was like the OG wake-up call for me before I even really knew much about this whole thing. I kind of knew about it kind of 2012, 2014. I was like, what's this whole, conflict, because it was going on then. And then Gary made that video. I was like, holy shit, like what truth bombs were dropped here. And I think every animal rights activist should see that video, even though it's super controversial.
The other glaring just omission here from her speech is the fact that, well, I say omissions. She's not talking about any other issue. So she's just arbitrarily focusing on the world's only Jewish state. She's ignoring the... Do you remember I did a post recently about that website, genocidewatch.org or whatever it is?
Yeah,
and it lists I think it lists like 19 genocides taking place worldwide. She's just focusing on the one alleged genocide. And by the way, that Genocide Watch website, that also listed Hamas as a genocidal group along with that. And that Hamas is a group who wants to genocide Israelis. So she's not mentioning any of these. She's not mentioning any of the other conflicts going on. She's not mentioning any of the other oppressions of Muslims going on, such as the Rohingya genocide in Myanmar, such as the Uyghur Muslims in China. She's not mentioning that Nard was held in Uganda, where there's a gay apartheid happening. She's not mentioning any of the stuff going on in her own country of India. She's not making even that. This is Nard in India, and she's not talking about human issues happening in India. She's just focusing on Israel. Imagine arbitrarily making the one day about animal rights, National Animal Rights Day, and she arbitrarily makes it about one country she dislikes. The selfishness of these people is just absolutely... right.
Just to quickly bring it back to anti-white hatred and anti-white racism, I wonder how much of it is, because I don't genuinely believe the majority of people want to murder Jewish people or white people. I wonder how much of it is just like a low-key kind of jealousy or like an outlet for them for maybe growing up secretly racist against white people and finding this kind of therapeutic. Because I can sort of imagine that. Like, I don't imagine this girl could do anything horrible to anybody else. She seems like a pretty nice, normal person outside these thoughts that she's been brainwashed with. But I wonder how many people are just low-key kind of like that, like, oh, this feels good to kind of like paint white people badly, because I'm like just been
interesting
my whole life. I guess that's a reasonable assumption.
I guess because I've never known that feeling before.
Nor have I.
Think, it would be hard for me to be able to say, but it's a very interesting.
But just it logically follows though. Like, if we believe that a lot of this is anti-white racism, and
right?
We similarly believe a lot of these people probably don't want to kill Jewish people. There's got to be a middle ground somewhere where it's just kind of like, oh, this is like kind of fun that I get to be a little bit racist.
They're letting off some steam, aren't they?
Right,
like this repressed anger they have throughout the whole of their childhood or whatever, and it's finally their blood just boils and they can, yes, now is the time. It's the current thing. I can.
My time to shine, baby.
Yes, but imagine doing it at on Animal Rights Day. It's just sickening.
All right.
No,
it is. It's really low behavior.
A single syllable in support of Palestine. To those in the movement who have remained publicly silent and who continue to stay quiet while claiming to care about issues of morality, peace, and human rights, you have shown that your social justice advocacy is in fact a self-serving endeavor. centering your own privilege.
So the human at the Animal Rights Day talks about centering of privilege. So she doesn't see the irony in this, that a human gets up with the microphone and takes up space on an Animal Rights Day and uses her human privilege to talk about animal oppressors, about her own kind enslaving animals. So this is human privilege in action. This is just like the animals can't communicate with her to tell her, what are you doing? Can you please not do this? Can you please not make this one day about the people slitting our throats in Gaza? Yeah. And she uses her human privilege here to center herself, to center the slave masters and oppressors of animals in Gaza and make this National Animal Rights Day about the slave masters. Right. That is human privilege.
It's disgusting. And she's not even centering vegans or people that are going to help animals. She's centering some of the worst animal abusers on the planet because they follow a thing, what's the halal slaughter? Where they don't even have welfare laws. And I'm the least person that's a fan of welfare, but I understand the general idea of minimizing pain before you're going to murder someone. It's better than absolutely nothing, which is what halal slaughter is. Like, they have to make sure the knife is really sharp before they do it. It's some of the worst. I think it's one of the worst things on the planet, halal slaughter. And you would have to be, those are the type of people that she is talking about here, Palestinians, because they are Muslims and Muslims generally follow halal slaughter.
Yeah, so it's horrific.
If you're going to center humans, at least center an animal defender, not like people that, support slitting the throats of animals.
Absolutely. And we should be balanced here. Unfortunately, Jews have also the horrific kosher slaughter, which is done in the same way. But in any case, she's centering the actual oppressors of animals in either way. She's not centering the actual animal defenders in this, but let's carry on.
Yeah. No, I hate all people that harm animals.
Oh, that's the end of it. Okay, thank God.
Are there any guys that are like spewing this shit? Is it mostly women? It's probably mostly girls.
I tend to find that most of these current pressure campaigns in the animal rights movement, it is mostly women doing them because most women are intersectionals. Most intersectionals are women, but there are plenty of toxic guys jumping on this as well. We've had guys in the UK threaten to disrupt or cancel NARD over this whole Palestine stuff. We're seeing cancellation campaigns being run by men online, so they do exist. But I guess I think it's mainly women in those kind of cancel mob spaces for whatever reason.
Yeah. This is one of those issues that I'm actually not interested in debating. I love doing streams like this and talking to like-minded people, but to me, it's like debating pedophilia or like rape. Like, I'm not going to debate whether that's wrong. It's very, very obvious. I'm not going to debase myself, because I've had some like people say, "Do you want to debate?" I'm like, no, like this is on the same level as things I hold, disgusting. So I'm not that interested, and it's a waste of time. Like, our time is so valuable on here. Most of it's going to go towards animals, and it's not actually helping them. It's just some like wank fest, and no. Because the only one time I tried to debate on Islam was like this guy, I think he was doing his PhD in economics or something. And then it turned out he like conceded in 10 minutes that Islam was the worst religion currently practiced, was my proposition. And he just wanted to chew the rag on like the historical stories of Islam, like the different wars and stuff. And I was like, I'm not here for this. Like, I'm here to debate like the morality of different religions. On my view, Islam is the worst has currently practiced. So after that, I was like, I'm not. A lot of the time, they just want to waste your time,
right?
And like spread lies. So yeah.
Well, Pat, it's been a fantastic stream. I thank you for coming on. I want you to just make a closing statement now, if you will. So I just want you to make a closing statement saying why anti-Israel advocacy could harm rather than help the animal rights movement. So the opposite of what these people in our movement are saying, which is saying that in order to help animal rights, we need to speak up for Palestine, whatever it is. Why do you think that as anti-Israel rhetoric could actually be harmful to our movement?
Yeah, so I think if you're anti-Israel, you're essentially pro-Palestine. And I think if you're pro-Palestine, you're essentially pro-Hamas, which means you're pro-terrorist, pro-jihadist, pro some of the most insane ideas in the world. So if I have to explain to you why that's bad for animals, I don't know what to say. Like, they're terrible ideas. You'll be promoting some of the most terrible people on earth, and there's no way that is going to help the interests of animals or anybody else.
And are there, because you know, I value having animal rights activists, whatever side they stand on in the debate, whether they're pro-Palestine, pro-Israel. Are there ways in which people who are who you know, maybe they do have a different view on the history from you? Because I want to make this movement inclusive. That's what it's all about for me, right? Are there people who have a different take on this from you? Are there ways in which they can, you know, still be a good animal rights activist, yet they have the opposite view than you do on this subject?
Like, logically speaking, you can be an actual neo-Nazi and be an animal rights person. So if you're asking me, can you be an animal rights person or vegan and be something else that is horrible? Like, logically, the answer is yes. Is that going to be helping anybody? I'm not sure. My intuition is that it's not.
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, you can be a number of things. You can be serial killer, like, you know, is that going to help us? Like, we got to draw the line somewhere about how inclusive that we want to be. And I've seen some very brave people in Palestine against the Hamas government, and they would rather move to Israel. And I really feel those are the people I really feel for, and those are the people I would like to defend and help. But to be honest, I'm not interested in forming alliances with terrorists. Like, I'm not sure that it's going to help the movement, no matter which way you look at it. But yeah, if they're Palestinian people and they're vegan or interested in animal rights and they don't like their government, those are more the people I'd be more reaching out to and have sympathy for.
Cool. Yeah, thanks, Pat. Well, those are some great last words before we get cancelled now. So thank you for coming onto the stream. And yeah, we hope you all enjoy the rest of your day, evenings, whatever. And whether you agree, disagree with any of the points raised in the stream, we hope you found that it provided you with some good counterpoints to the current mainstreamed points that you're hearing within the animal rights movement. So if you do want to share this stream because you found it interesting and stuff, feel free to do that. And, you know, let's start the discussion. Let's start the debate. Feel free to drop your comments below the video, guys, and we can have some debates and stuff in the comments section about this. But yeah, thanks everyone for joining. And yeah, me and Pat will see you all later.
Yeah, cheers to Zionism.